In the heart of a dense, ancient forest in Eastern Europe, there lay an isolated village named Duskmire. This village had a dark history, shrouded in secrets and superstition. At the edge of Duskmire stood an old asylum, abandoned for decades, known to locals as Briarwood Asylum. It was said that the place was cursed, haunted by the souls of the tormented patients who had perished there under mysterious circumstances. The asylum had a reputation for cruelty. The head doctor, Dr. Victor Stein, was a man obsessed with experimental treatments and the occult. Rumors circulated that he conducted horrific experiments on the patients, believing he could cure madness by delving into forbidden rituals and dark magic. One fateful night, a fire broke out, and the asylum was consumed in flames. Many patients and staff perished, and Dr. Stein was never found. The ruins of Briarwood were left to decay, and the villagers avoided it, fearing the curse that lingered. One stormy autumn evening, a young journalist named Marcus arrived in Duskmire. He was drawn to the asylum by the stories he had heard and hoped to write a groundbreaking piece on the mysterious place. Despite the villagers' warnings, Marcus was determined to explore Briarwood Asylum and uncover its secrets. As he approached the asylum, the wind howled through the trees, and the sky darkened with ominous clouds. The building loomed ahead, a decaying structure covered in ivy and moss. The front gate creaked as he pushed it open, and he stepped into the overgrown courtyard, feeling a chill that seemed to seep into his bones. Inside the asylum, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. The walls were covered in peeling paint and grime, and the floor was littered with debris. Marcus turned on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. He took out his camera and began to document the scene, taking pictures of the desolate halls and abandoned rooms. As he ventured deeper into the asylum, he felt an unsettling presence, as if unseen eyes were watching him. He heard faint whispers, almost indistinguishable from the rustling of the wind, but they grew louder and more distinct as he moved further in. The whispers seemed to form words, calling his name, beckoning him to go deeper. Marcus found himself in the basement, where the walls were lined with old medical equipment and rusty cages. He discovered Dr. Stein's office, the door slightly ajar. Inside, the room was filled with books on dark magic and occult rituals. On the desk lay Dr. Stein's journal, its pages filled with cryptic notes and diagrams. As Marcus read the journal, he learned of Dr. Stein's descent into madness. The doctor had been experimenting with rituals to open a gateway to another realm, a place of darkness and torment. He believed he could harness the power of the other side to cure his patients, but instead, he had unleashed a malevolent force that consumed him and the asylum. The air in the room grew colder, and Marcus felt a presence behind him. He turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, a man in a tattered lab coat with hollow, sunken eyes. It was Dr. Stein, or what remained of him. The doctor's face twisted into a sinister grin as he stepped forward, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "You shouldn't have come here," Dr. Stein whispered, his voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. "You cannot leave now. You belong to them." Suddenly, the room was filled with shadows, shapes of tormented souls reaching out to Marcus. He tried to run, but the door slammed shut, trapping him inside. The shadows closed in, their cold, clammy hands grasping at him, pulling him down into the darkness. Marcus struggled, his screams echoing through the asylum, but there was no escape. The shadows enveloped him, dragging him into the void. His flashlight flickered and went out, and the room was plunged into darkness. In the days that followed, the villagers noticed that Marcus had not returned. A search party was formed, but when they reached Briarwood Asylum, they found no trace of him. His car was still parked outside, his belongings untouched. The asylum stood silent and empty, as if it had swallowed him whole. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about Marcus's fate, believing that the curse of Briarwood had claimed another victim. The asylum remained a place of fear and dread, its dark history a warning to those who would dare to uncover its secrets. Years passed, and Briarwood Asylum continued to decay, a forgotten relic of a dark past. But on stormy autumn nights, when the wind howled through the trees and the sky darkened with ominous clouds, The villagers could still hear faint whispers coming from the direction of the asylum, calling out to those who would listen. The legend of Briarwood Asylum lived on, a tale of madness, dark magic, and a malevolent force that lingered in the shadows, waiting for the next curious soul to venture into its cursed halls. And so, the asylum stood, a testament to the horrors that lay hidden in the depths of the human mind, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead was forever blurred. As years slipped by, Briarwood Asylum became more than just a place of fearful whispers. It was now a legend spoken of with a mix of dread and fascination. The villagers of Duskmire avoided the asylum, and the stories of those who vanished became a grim folklore. The asylum stood as a monument to despair, its reputation attracting those with a morbid curiosity. In the spring of the following year, a group of paranormal investigators, led by a seasoned expert named Elena Frost, arrived in Duskmire. Elena had a reputation for debunking supernatural claims, but Briarwood Asylum intrigued her. She was determined to investigate the asylum's haunted reputation and prove or disprove the existence of the malevolent force said to reside there. Elena's team consisted of 4 members: Alex, a tech expert with a passion for gadgets; Mia, a sensitive and intuitive medium; Jordan, a skeptic with a sharp mind; and Nate, a documentarian capturing their journey. They arrived at the village, met with apprehensive glances and wary words from the locals, but remained undeterred. On the first evening, the team set up their equipment: infrared cameras, EVP, electronic voice phenomena, recorders, and motion sensors. They entered the asylum as dusk fell, the setting sun casting long shadows across the crumbling facade. The door groaned as it opened, and they stepped into the darkness. The asylum was even more decrepit than Marcus had described. The air was thick with dust and mildew, and the scent of rot was overpowering. Elena and her team began their investigation in the library, where Dr. Stein's journal had been found. They set up their equipment and began to document their findings. As the night deepened, the temperature in the asylum dropped significantly. Mia, sensitive to the spiritual realm, began to feel an oppressive presence. She described a sense of being watched and a cold pressure around her. The cameras picked up strange anomalies: flickering lights, shadowy figures darting across the frame, and inexplicable cold spots. At midnight, Jordan suggested they split up to cover more ground. Elena, Mia, and Nate would investigate the basement, while Alex and Jordan explored the upper floors. The decision was made with a mix of excitement and unease. In the basement, Elena and her team found the remnants of Dr. Stein's experiments: old medical equipment, cages, and faded symbols etched into the walls. Mia, feeling a growing sense of dread, suggested they perform a séance to communicate with any lingering spirits. Elena, though skeptical, agreed. The séance began with Mia attempting to contact the spirits. The room was silent except for the occasional creak of the building. Suddenly, the air grew frigid, and the candles flickered. Mia's voice trembled as she spoke, asking for the presence of Dr. Stein or any souls trapped within the asylum. A cold breeze swept through the room, and the EVP recorder picked up a distorted, whispering voice. It spoke in fragmented phrases: "Help us, trapped, forever." The team's breath misted in the freezing air, and the temperature dropped further. Shadows coalesced in the corners of the room, forming grotesque shapes. At that moment, a deafening crash echoed through the asylum. Elena and her team rushed to investigate, finding that one of the upper floors had collapsed. They regrouped, their nerves frayed but their resolve strengthened. Meanwhile, Alex and Jordan, exploring the upper floors, had stumbled upon a hidden door behind a rotting bookcase. The door led to a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. As they descended, their flashlights revealed a chamber lined with faded murals depicting disturbing scenes of occult rituals and tortured souls. In the center of the chamber was an altar, upon which lay a large, sealed book. The book was bound in what appeared to be human skin and inscribed with strange symbols. Jordan, skeptical but intrigued, opened the book, revealing pages filled with arcane text and illustrations of forbidden rituals. As Jordan read aloud from the book, a sudden gust of wind extinguished their flashlights, plunging them into darkness. The chamber was filled with a sinister laughter, and the walls seemed to close in. Shadows writhed, forming into ghastly figures that reached out toward them. Panic set in, and Alex and Jordan scrambled to find their way back. Back in the basement, Elena, Mia, and Nate felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The temperature continued to plummet, and the whispers grew louder, forming coherent sentences. "They are coming, they are here." The ground trembled, and the walls seemed to close in, as if the asylum itself was alive and hostile. As the night wore on, the activity intensified. The spirits, restless and agitated, seemed to react to the intrusion of the investigators. Elena and her team realized they had unwittingly triggered something by uncovering the book and performing the séance. Desperate to escape, the team regrouped, their once methodical investigation now a frantic struggle for survival. They navigated through the asylum's twisting corridors, their senses overwhelmed by the supernatural activity. The shadows grew bolder, their forms solidifying into ghastly apparitions that chased them. In their desperate flight, they reached the main entrance, only to find the door jammed. The asylum seemed to be closing in around them, the shadows reaching out with icy tendrils. Elena, determined to escape, led her team in a final push. They managed to force the door open, stumbling into the night. Outside, the storm raged on, and the asylum loomed behind them, its dark windows like hollow eyes watching their escape. Exhausted and shaken, the team retreated to the village, where they recounted their harrowing experience. The villagers, though relieved to see them safe, warned them never to return. The asylum remained, its dark secrets untouched, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead was perilously thin. The legend of Briarwood Asylum grew, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lay hidden in the shadows, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to wander too close. And so, the asylum stood, a grim testament to the dark forces that had once been unleashed, its haunted halls echoing with the whispers of those who had come before and those who would come after. Weeks passed since the harrowing escape from Briarwood Asylum, and the story of Elena Frost and her team became a chilling addition to the lore surrounding the cursed building. Despite the warning from the villagers, the legend of the asylum only grew in intrigue and allure. Among those captivated by the tale was a historian named Robert Hale, known for his work on occult history and supernatural phenomena. Robert had been following the story closely, fascinated by the accounts of Briarwood Asylum. Determined to piece together the asylum's dark history and uncover the truth behind Dr. Victor Stein's experiments, he decided to visit Duskmire himself. Equipped with historical records, occult texts, and a rigorous methodology, Robert arrived in the village in early autumn. The villagers greeted him with the same apprehension they had shown Elena and her team, warning him of the dangers that lay within Briarwood. Robert, however, was undeterred. He was determined to conduct a thorough investigation, driven by the possibility of uncovering truths long buried. On his first night, Robert explored the outskirts of the asylum, documenting the external architecture and taking notes on the condition of the building. The asylum loomed ominously in the darkness, its once grand facade now a crumbling ruin. The wind howled through the empty windows, and the moonlight cast eerie shadows across the broken walls. Entering the asylum the next morning, Robert began his exploration. The interior was as desolate as before, but he approached it with a historian's precision, analyzing every detail. He was particularly interested in the occult symbols and the journals left behind by Dr. Stein. In the library, Robert found Dr. Stein's journal and additional documents detailing the experiments conducted on the patients. The accounts were chilling, descriptions of rituals meant to open a gateway to a dark realm, the suffering inflicted upon the patients, and the eventual rise of a malevolent entity. Dr. Stein had recorded his growing madness and his belief that he was on the brink of a monumental discovery. Robert also found a hidden compartment in the library, containing a collection of old photographs and letters. One letter, addressed to Dr. Stein from a mysterious correspondent, spoke of a powerful artifact that could seal the gateway the doctor had opened. The letter warned that the artifact was hidden within the asylum, but its exact location remained unknown. Determined to find the artifact and put an end to the curse, Robert ventured into the basement, where he had learned from previous accounts that some of the darkest experiments had taken place. The basement was a labyrinth of cold, damp corridors lined with remnants of medical procedures gone awry. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on him. In the basement, Robert discovered a large, sealed vault, covered in occult symbols and locked with a complex mechanism. Using the knowledge from Dr. Stein's journal, he deciphered the symbols and managed to unlock the vault. Inside, he found an ornate chest covered in strange runes and a heavy, ancient book bound in dark leather. Opening the chest, Robert found an intricately crafted amulet, its surface covered in the same symbols found throughout the asylum. He realized that this must be the artifact mentioned in the letter, a key to sealing the dark gateway. The amulet pulsed with a faint, eerie glow, as if it were alive. As Robert examined the amulet, the air grew colder, and the shadows in the basement began to shift and writhe. The malevolent presence that had tormented Elena and her team seemed to stir, sensing that its hold on the asylum was being threatened. Robert's flashlight flickered, and he heard distant, echoing whispers, words of anger and malevolence. The shadows coalesced into dark forms, their eyes glowing with an unsettling light. The temperature dropped rapidly, and the vault door slammed shut behind him, trapping him inside. Realizing the urgency of the situation, Robert grasped the amulet and began to chant the incantations from the ancient book, hoping to perform the ritual to close the gateway. The shadows swirled around him, their forms becoming more solid and aggressive. The whispers grew louder, their voices a cacophony of rage. As he recited the final words of the incantation, the amulet began to glow brighter, casting a blinding light that pushed the shadows back. The dark entities screeched and writhed, their forms dissolving into the light. The ground shook, and the walls trembled as the gateway began to close. With a final burst of energy, the light from the amulet engulfed the chamber, and the shadows vanished. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the basement returned to its cold, silent state. Robert, exhausted but relieved, realized that he had succeeded in sealing the dark realm and banishing the malevolent presence from the asylum. Emerging from the basement, Robert took one last look at Briarwood Asylum. The building, though still a crumbling ruin, felt different, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. He carefully placed the amulet and the ancient book in a protective case, planning to take them to a museum where they could be studied and preserved. Robert left Duskmire, his investigation complete and the asylum's dark chapter seemingly closed. The village gradually resumed its quiet existence, and the story of Briarwood Asylum became a tale of triumph over darkness. Though the asylum remained a ruin, its legend transformed from a cautionary tale of terror to a story of bravery and perseverance. The malevolent force had been sealed away, and the asylum stood as a reminder of the delicate balance between the known and the unknown, a place where the shadows had been confronted and ultimately overcome. Robert Hale's departure from Duskmire marked a turning point for Briarwood Asylum. The village began to slowly recover from the shadow of fear that had loomed over it for so long. The asylum, now seemingly free from its malevolent influence, became a subject of curiosity and historical study. As Robert prepared to present his findings at a prominent conference on the paranormal, he received a cryptic letter. The envelope was plain, but the paper inside was old and brittle. The letter was from someone claiming to be a former patient of Briarwood Asylum. The writer described having experienced vivid dreams of Dr. Stein and his dark experiments, and warned that the curse might not be completely broken. They urged Robert to return to Duskmire, suggesting that there was something he had missed, a final, hidden truth about the asylum's dark legacy. Intrigued and somewhat unsettled, Robert decided to return to Duskmire for one final investigation. The villagers were apprehensive, but he assured them that he was only seeking to ensure the safety of the asylum and to verify his findings. With the amulet and ancient book in tow, he ventured back to Briarwood. This time, Robert approached the asylum with a deeper sense of caution. He revisited the basement and the vault, where he had found the amulet. As he meticulously examined every corner of the asylum, he discovered something he had overlooked before. A small, concealed compartment hidden behind a false wall in the basement. Inside the compartment was a final manuscript, its pages covered in symbols and text written in Dr. Stein's hand. The manuscript described a second, more sinister ritual intended to use the asylum's dark energy to create a gateway not just for spirits, but for entities far more powerful and dangerous. The ritual had been incomplete, its purpose lost in the chaos of the fire. However, it detailed how, even without the full ritual, residual dark energy could remain, potentially causing harm if not properly contained. The manuscript also contained a final incantation, a counter-ritual to neutralize the residual dark energy and ensure the asylum would never again serve as a conduit for malevolent forces. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Robert prepared to perform the counter-ritual. He gathered the necessary components, including the amulet and items described in the manuscript. As he began the ritual, the asylum's atmosphere grew tense, and the temperature plummeted. Shadows seemed to writhe and twist in response to the invocation. The walls of the asylum trembled as if protesting the ritual. Robert chanted the incantation with a sense of urgency, the words of the counter-ritual echoing through the desolate halls. In the midst of the ritual, a new shadowy figure emerged, more powerful and sinister than anything Robert had encountered before. It was Dr. Stein himself, his form distorted and twisted by dark energy. The entity's eyes burned with a malevolent fire as it advanced toward Robert, seeking to stop the ritual and reclaim its power. With determination, Robert faced the entity. He continued the incantation, using the amulet to channel the energy needed to complete the counter-ritual. The shadowy figure roared in fury, its form dissipating as the energy from the amulet and the power of the ritual clashed with it. The final incantation reached its climax, and a blinding light filled the asylum. The shadows were banished, and the dark energy was sealed away. The building quaked violently, but then fell silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the asylum was left in a state of eerie calm. Exhausted but victorious, Robert completed his investigation. He carefully secured the manuscript and the amulet, planning to return them to a safe place for study. The asylum, now truly cleansed of its malevolent influence, was left as a historical relic, its dark chapter closed. As Robert prepared to leave Duskmire, he noticed a change in the villagers. They seemed lighter, more at ease, as if a weight had been lifted from their lives. The village began to slowly recover, and the asylum became a distant memory, a place of dark history rather than active terror. Robert returned to his professional life with a renewed sense of purpose, his experiences at Briarwood Asylum becoming a defining chapter in his career. His research and findings were shared with the world, contributing to the understanding of paranormal phenomena and the nature of dark forces. In the end, Briarwood Asylum stood as a haunting reminder of the dark and mysterious forces that had once plagued it. But its legacy had transformed from a tale of terror into a story of bravery and redemption, a testament to the power of confronting the unknown and the enduring strength of the human spirit.